My name is Natalie Carter. I am 42 years old, and the night my father stood in front of 300 wedding guests and called me a glorified security guard was the night I decided he would finally learn who his daughter really was. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, polished marble floors, and tall crystal vases overflowing with white roses. My younger brother Michael sat at the head table in his tuxedo, glowing with the pride of a man who had just married into Houston's wealthiest family. Guests raised glasses of champagne, and the room pulsed with laughter, music, and the clinking of silverware. It was the kind of celebration my father had always dreamed of hosting, a display of prestige and perfection. I stood at the back of the room in a simple black dress, half hidden behind a column, watching it all unfold. To most people here, I was just the quiet older sister, the one who never married, never had children, never seemed to make much of herself. I could hear the whispers, see the polite smiles from people who barely remembered my name. My father, David Carter, adjusted his bow tie and lifted his champagne flute. His voice, deep and booming from years of sales pitches, carried effortlessly across the dance floor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, smiling proudly, "I want to say a few words tonight about success. My son Michael is the very picture of it. A rising star in the corporate world, already a regional manager at just 35. He has the beautiful wife, the new home, the company car, everything a father could wish for." The crowd applauded, and Michael's new in-laws beamed with satisfaction. My father continued, his eyes flicking toward me at the back of the room. His smile thinned just slightly. "And of course, my daughter Natalie. Well, she's taken a different path. She never really found her place, dropped out of school, never settled down, no grandchildren for me. She works in security, I believe, important in its own way, but nothing too remarkable. Still, we love her." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the guests. My chest burned as though a weight had been pressed against it. I had heard versions of this speech my entire life. Michael the golden boy, Natalie the disappointment. When I was 12, I was the artsy one, while Michael was the smart one. At graduation, my father bragged endlessly about Michael's football scholarship while ignoring my own academic achievements. Even after I built a career in service, he never asked, never wanted to know. Now, in front of hundreds of strangers, he reduced 20 years of sacrifice to nothing more than security work. I clenched my glass so tightly my knuckles went white. He had no idea what those words would set in motion. The truth is, I had never worked a day in private security. What my family believed was a small job guarding office buildings was in reality the smallest mask I wore. For the past 20 years, I have served as chief investigator with the Homeland Counter-Narcotics Unit, a federal task force headquartered in Dallas. My work has nothing to do with checking ID badges at office doors. It has meant midnight raids, undercover operations, and the kind of decisions that decide who lives and who does not. 3 days earlier, I had been standing on the tarmac of a military airfield outside El Paso, the desert wind biting my face while helicopters lifted into the night sky. Operation Iron Veil had been 18 months in the making, a joint mission to dismantle one of the most violent syndicates funneling drugs and weapons across the border. I had been the lead architect, drawing up surveillance plans, coordinating with intelligence, running safe house debriefs with agents who looked like ghosts after weeks in the field. I had lived and breathed this operation. I had missed Christmas, my goddaughter's graduation, even my mother's last birthday. I told myself that one day my father would understand that the reason I was absent from so many family milestones was because I was protecting families everywhere else. But deep down, I knew better. To him, only Michael's achievements counted. Michael had corner offices and shiny cars. I had scars and classified files. The night the raids began, I was in the command center, staring at a wall of live drone feeds. I watched agents breach compounds, heard bursts of gunfire through headsets, felt my chest tighten with every silence that stretched too long. When it was over, when the last suspect was cuffed and the evidence secured, my supervisor, Director Alvarez, put a hand on my shoulder. "Natalie," he said firmly, "you have been running on caffeine and adrenaline for 2 years. Take the weekend. Go to your brother's wedding. That's an order. And so here I was, standing in a glittering ballroom, surrounded by people who thought I was a failed daughter in a borrowed dress. They could not begin to imagine that just 72 hours earlier, I had been reviewing intercepted codes that meant life or death, or that my name now appeared in federal briefings read in Washington every morning. I had no intention of revealing the truth tonight. My plan was simple: show my face, endure the humiliation, and leave quietly. But humiliation has a way of awakening a resolve you did not know still burned. My father's words at the microphone cut deeper than I expected. He had mocked me before, but never in a room this large, never with so much smug certainty. And though he did not know it yet, the night was not going to end the way he imagined. I slipped away from the ballroom as the guests lifted their glasses and the band struck up another polished tune. My heart pounded, though not from nerves. My instincts were trained to respond to alerts, and the text on my phone had been short but commanding: Channel 5, now. The hotel lobby was quieter than the chaos inside. A television mounted above the bar glowed against the dim lighting. I stopped cold when I saw the headline running across the screen in bold letters: Operation Iron Veil dismantles cartel, $2 billion in assets seized. The anchor's voice was measured, urgent. In what officials are calling the most successful narcotics operation in decades, federal agents have dismantled the Serrano syndicate, long considered untouchable. The mission was led by Chief Investigator Natalie Carter, a 20-year veteran who pioneered new intelligence methods that cracked the syndicate's encrypted communications. My photograph filled the screen, an official headshot taken months earlier, sharp suit, serious eyes. It looked nothing like the woman standing alone in a black dress just a few yards away. The report continued, showing footage of raids, armored vehicles smashing through gates, agents storming compounds, helicopters circling. I remembered the sound of those rotors in my bones, the sting of sand in my eyes when I hit the ground running. The bartender leaned on the counter, shaking his head. Damn, whoever that woman is, she's got nerves of steel. A group of hotel guests turned to look at the screen, murmuring. One woman clutched her husband's arm. That's her, isn't it? The one who caught Serrano's men. They say she's testifying in Washington soon. My throat tightened. They were talking about me as though I were a ghost, present and absent at once. The anchor added, sources confirm Carter is already being discussed for senior leadership when Director Alvarez retires next year. Federal officials say the operation likely saved thousands of lives by cutting off cartel distribution networks across Texas and beyond. Applause broke out at the bar, strangers raising their glasses to a name none of them realized belonged to the quiet woman standing nearby. I gripped the edge of a chair to steady myself. A strange mix of pride and sorrow washed over me. For years, I had buried myself in the shadows of my work, unseen and unrecognized, all while my father paraded Michael's latest promotions. Now my face was flashing across national news, celebrated as a hero, while inside that ballroom, I remained invisible, dismissed as a failure. I turned from the screen, pulse hammering. My father's voice carried faintly from the ballroom doors, preparing his toast about success and sacrifice. He had no idea the truth was already breaking into the world outside his carefully polished bubble, and I was done letting him bury me. When I stepped back into the ballroom, the music had softened. Guests were settling into their seats, waiters circulating with polished trays of champagne. My father stood near the head table, tapping his glass with the stem of a knife, summoning silence. The room stilled. He thrived on moments like this, an audience, a spotlight, the chance to play master of ceremonies. Friends, he boomed, his grin wide, his shoulders squared. Tonight is not just about a marriage. It is about success, about what it means to build a life you can be proud of. My chest tightened. I already knew where this was going. My son Michael, he continued gesturing grandly toward the head table, has always been an example of hard work and determination. A football star in high school, a college graduate with honors, and now one of the youngest regional directors at his company. He and his wife have a beautiful home, new cars, everything you dream for your children. The applause swelled, and Michael raised his glass, basking in it, Then came the pause, the inevitable turn. My father's eyes swept the room until they landed on me in the back. His smile flickered. And of course, my daughter Natalie. His tone shifted, polite but patronizing. Well, she chose a different path. She left school early, never really found her footing. No husband, no kids to carry the family name. She works in security, I believe. A guard of some kind. Nothing wrong with honest work, of course, but not exactly the future I imagined for her. A strained laugh drifted through the crowd. Someone coughed into their napkin. The words landed like stones in my stomach. I gripped the back of a chair, fighting the urge to storm out. But the fire inside me only burned hotter. My father raised his glass higher, oblivious. The point is, success is a matter of choices. Michael chose wisely. He built something lasting. Some of us do, some do not. The silence that followed wasn't admiration. It was discomfort. People glanced at one another, at me, at their phones where the news alerts were still buzzing. A few shifted in their chairs, sensing something off balance, though my father remained blind to it. I could almost hear my own pulse in my ears. My father's voice, so full of pride for one child and dismissal for the other, had echoed in my head my entire life. Tonight, in this room full of witnesses, he had reduced me to less than nothing. But what he did not know, what none of them knew, was that his toast had lit the final spark. And I was not going to stay silent anymore. "Dad?" The word slipped from my mouth louder than I intended. It cut through the clinking glasses and murmurs like a blade. Every head turned toward the back of the ballroom where I stood, black dress stark against the golden light. My father froze, his champagne flute suspended midair. "Natalie?" he said with forced patience. "Honey, I'm giving a toast." "I need to correct something," I replied, stepping forward. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady, deliberate. A hush fell over the crowd. 300 eyes followed me as I walked the long aisle between tables. My voice carried clearly in the silence. "You said I dropped out of school, that I never found my place." My father's smile tightened. "Well, yes, you left university after a year. That's what I remember." "I left after my freshman year," I said evenly, "because I was recruited into federal service. I trained at the Law Enforcement Academy and joined Homeland Counter-Narcotics before I was 20. Gasps fluttered across the room. A man at one of the front tables tilted his phone toward his wife. She glanced at the screen, then at me, her jaw dropping. "You said I work in security," I continued, my eyes locked on my father's pale face. "I am not a guard. I am chief investigator for the Homeland Counter-Narcotics Unit. I have spent 2 decades dismantling some of the deadliest drug syndicates in this hemisphere." A low murmur surged through the guests. Someone whispered too loudly, "That's her. She's on the news right now." Screens glowed across the room as people pulled up the same broadcast I had just seen in the lobby. My father tried to chuckle, his voice faltering. "Now, Natalie, this isn't—" "This week," I cut him off, my voice firm. "I led the operation that took down the Serrano cartel. 37 arrests, $2 billion seized, the largest raid in federal history." A silence heavier than stone settled over the ballroom. My father's hand trembled. The flute slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. I took another step forward, standing just feet from the head table now. "You said success comes from making the right choices. You're right about that. I chose to serve this country. I chose to risk my life so that other children wouldn't grow up poisoned by cartel drugs. I chose sacrifice over comfort." The guests stared at me, some wide-eyed, some ashamed, some whispering to each other with awe. The weight of years of silence pressed out of me in every word. For the first time in my life, my father had no story left to tell. As the stunned silence stretched, I felt the vibration in my clutch. My phone. I slipped it out discreetly, the screen glowing with an encrypted notification from headquarters. "Urgent. Possible Serrano affiliates sighted in Houston. Stay alert." For a second, the ballroom vanished. My training kicked in. The measured breath, the quick scan of exits, the cataloging of shadows at the edge of the room. I lifted my eyes from the phone to the crowd, scanning faces the way I had in every safe house, every compromised street corner. Guests, still buzzing from my revelation, had no idea the danger lingering just outside their gilded celebration. My father stood rigid behind the head table, lips pressed thin, while my brother stared at me like he'd never seen me before. The chandeliers glowed overhead, oblivious to the possibility that blood could stain this marble floor before the night was done. I tucked the phone away, heart pounding but steps steady. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter mocked for being just security might now be the only reason this wedding didn't become a crime scene. Near the entrance, 2 hotel guards moved quickly, guiding a man in a leather jacket out of the ballroom. Most guests barely noticed, distracted by phones lighting up with news alerts about the Serrano bust. But I saw everything, the twitch in his jaw, the way his hand hovered near his pocket. He wasn't a guest. He was a scout. My stomach tightened. The cartel wasn't finished. They never were. I moved closer to the head table, lowering my voice just enough for the people nearest me to hear. There's a reason my job matters. The very people I've spent my career fighting could be anywhere, even here. A ripple of unease passed through the front rows. Someone shifted their chair. Another set down a glass too hard. "Don't be dramatic," my father hissed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I straightened. "Dramatic?" "Dad, I've spent nights wondering if I'd make it home alive. I've been shot at, hunted, targeted by men whose names you've only seen buried in headlines. Tonight is no different. That man they just escorted out, he wasn't here for wedding cake." Gasps. Guests twisted to look toward the doors, eyes widening as the reality settled in. I let the silence stretch, heavy and undeniable. "This," I said quietly, "is what I live with every day. And you call it just security." The weight of my words hung in the air, sharper than shattered glass. For the first time, my father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. His bravado stripped away, replaced with something close to fear. The ballroom had fallen into an uneasy silence. Guests shifted in their seats, caught between the glittering wedding they had come to celebrate and the shadow of truth now hanging over the room. The crystal chandeliers sparkled above us, but the glow felt colder, sharper, as if every facet of light had turned into a mirror reflecting at my father's lies. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His hand trembled, still wet with champagne, where the glass had slipped from his grip and shattered on the floor. For years, he had controlled every narrative. Michael the golden boy, Natalie the afterthought. But tonight, the story no longer belonged to him. I drew a breath and faced the crowd. "You all know my father's version of me. The girl who dropped out, the woman who couldn't keep up, the sister who never measured against Michael. That is the story you've heard at every barbecue, every holiday, every casual conversation." I let my gaze sweep the room, locking eyes with strangers and cousins alike. But here's the truth. While you believed I was wasting years, I was hunting monsters most of you could not imagine. A guest at the second table whispered, "She's the one from the news. It's her." Another voice answered, "It says here she dismantled the whole Serrano syndicate." Dozens of phones glowed. Faces turned from me to their screens and back again, trying to reconcile the woman in the black dress with the federal agent whose image filled every headline. I turned back to my father. His jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed him, small, desperate, cornered. "You want to talk about choices?" I asked. My voice didn't waver. I chose to step into safe houses knowing I might not walk out. I chose to carry files that, if leaked, could get me killed in an hour. I chose to miss birthdays, anniversaries, even my own mother's last days, because the mission had to come first. Not because I wanted glory, because it mattered. I let that sink in. My brother Michael stared at the table, his hands clasped tight. His wedding night celebration twisted into something else entirely. My new sister-in-law's smile was gone, replaced by unease. I softened my tone. In 20 years, not once did my family ask me what I actually did. Not once. You were so eager to believe I had failed, because it made the Golden Boy story shine brighter. The guests were silent now, every eye fixed on me. I straightened my shoulders. Well, tonight, you've all seen the truth, and it is bigger than the story my father has told for a lifetime. I let the silence linger, 300 faces reflecting back at me, faces that had known me all my life, yet had never truly seen me. My father stood frozen behind the head table, his tuxedo hanging awkwardly on his small frame, his mouth opening and closing like a man searching for words that no longer existed. I turned slightly toward my brother. "Michael," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Congratulations on your wedding. I hope you and your wife build a life full of joy." He swallowed hard, eyes lowered. "Natalie, we had no idea." "No," I replied softly. "You didn't, because you never asked." The truth landed heavier than any accusation. Michael's shoulders slumped, his bride clasped his hand, and the head table that had been a stage for triumph now looked like a witness stand. I stepped back, the click of my heels echoing in the cavernous room. No one stopped me. No one whispered this time. Even the band had gone quiet, their instruments resting on their laps as though they, too, were waiting for resolution. At the double doors, I paused. My father's voice came at last, thin and breaking. "Natalie, wait!" I turned slightly, but did not face him. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. I was wrong." For the first time in my life, my father sounded like a man stripped of pride. I closed my eyes, letting the moment settle. "I know," I said, and pushed through the doors. The night air outside was cool against my skin. Houston's skyline shimmered beyond the parking lot, a reminder that life went on, indifferent to family drama or wounded pride. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down. 17 missed calls from reporters, dozens of messages from colleagues, agents I trusted with my life, congratulating me on Iron Veil's success. And one new text from Director Alvarez. "The president wants you in Washington Monday morning. Be ready." A laugh escaped me, quiet but genuine, the first in what felt like months. My father had spent the evening preaching about success while belittling me as if my life had amounted to scraps. Yet less than 48 hours from now, I would be briefing the President of the United States. I slid behind the wheel of my car, hands steady, breath slow. For years, I had craved one thing: my father's approval, the impossible dream of hearing him say he was proud of me. Tonight I realized I didn't need it anymore. My worth had never been his to measure. As I drove into the night, the lesson crystallized like glass under pressure. Success isn't the corner office or the applause of a crowd. It isn't the approval of parents who cannot see you. Success is the quiet knowledge that you have done something that matters, that your life's work has protected others, even if the cost was loneliness or sacrifice. And for the first time in my life, I felt free.